Hey everybody, I got another Kirblog this week, and another one yet again. I just can't stop having guests, but I mean, when ideas pop in, I can't help but do that. So this time I'm joined by a new guest. I'm here with GaijinGoombah. Say hi.
What's up, guys?
Hey. So we were catching up. We hadn't been talking for a couple of weeks. It's been a while since we caught up, and we were. I don't even start. We were talking about like we're talking about Dragon Ball Z for like ever, as is usually as usually the case with when you talk with me. And then we got on the subject of South Park: The Stick of Truth, which just came out recently. And I haven't played the game. I am not able to play the game currently, as I do not have the any of the systems required to, or powerful enough a computer to play on Steam. But I watched a playthrough of it and checked out all the cutscenes and everything, and thought it was really cool. And Gaijin was telling me about a video that he had done earlier about his opinions regarding the censorship that allegedly had happened with the international releases of the game in certain European countries regarding the Nazi zombie stuff. If you want to go check that out, you can click this little annotation I'm going to put here to go see his video. But if you were to surmise your opinion, would you have like a shorter version to catch people up with like what your respective thought on it is?
Pretty much. The whole idea is that I am in agreement with everyone that censorship sucks. I understand that an artist needs to be able to say and do what they feel they need to do within their work in order to get their thoughts, their points, and their opinions across. But you cannot do that and have the international market in mind without understanding that, for better or for worse, there are censorship laws. Mm-hmm. And like the whole thing that I was saying is that I have no problems with South Park. I really like South Park. I love the fact that it's really satirical and on topic, and I think the Stick of Truth is really good. Not only does it seem seamless between how the show is presented and how the game is presented, but it's got some really interesting jokes, for lack of a better word, and
it's a pretty solid RPG, right?
Yeah, and the gameplay is really good. It has timed hits, which you don't see very often outside of like the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi,
which they said
games.
Was a big influence, by the
Right.
way. Which is it's sad to me that it's not on the Wii U, because I'd be playing the shit out of it right now if it was. But
right.
Carry on.
It's just I don't. People have already assumed that I have a problem with South Park. I have no problem with South Park. It's that when you create a game like that, if you don't think about how you're going to have to market it, because I talked with a couple of people that work in localization, and you have to think about what it is that you're going to have to add or remove in order to make it market worthy, or being able to go gold, so to speak, to the international market. The example that I used was China and maps, and how it works is that if there's a game in China that has a map and has a map of China, if Tibet and Taiwan are not included as being a part of China, the game will be banned in China. I'm not saying that that's fair, and I'm not saying that that's right, but that's freaking how it is. That's how. Right. That's the world that we live in. We have people that will be offended by stuff. People will be offended by swastikas. People will be offended by racism. People will be offended by things that we understand to be ironic or satirical. But just because it's ironic and satirical doesn't mean that everyone else is going to be in on the joke. There are people that are going to take it personally, and for better or for worse, it's not going to be presented to the general population. A lot of people have been arguing, well, what about North Korea and China, where they censor that stuff where the people may want it after all? That's fine, but we live in the real world, and the real world has rules and laws and regulations, and this is a business. You know, as much as I would love for all video games to be art, video games are a business first. And when you try to be creatively open about satire and irony when it comes to vulgarity, it's not going to work. Because and it's like, to sum it all up, the U.S. does not equal the rest of the world, for better or for worse, and 9 times out of 10, it will be for worse. But that's just the world that we live in.
So the part of that that struck me as interesting, because I think something had also made me think about this in particular, and this is kind of where the overall subject comes from that I wanted to talk about, is about, you brought up a couple times, including before when we recorded, the phrase, if you are designing this game for international release. Mm-hmm. So a while ago, a couple weeks ago, I did another Kirblog about do cartoons make us racially sensitive, which you can go check that out if you want, the little link to that. And in that, I believe I went over the fact that I find shows and games and movies and things where there is an international cast of characters or people of different sexualities, races, languages, ethnicities, etc. Anything that sets them apart and makes everybody well-rounded. Not just in personality, but also that type of stuff that also helps to define them. I find that to be really intriguing and can make for really interesting, story points and bits of character development. But something that I think actually one of the commentators pointed this out to me in that video, or it might have even inspired the video in the first place, and that is for instance, because Gaijin, you watched Tome, so you've noticed that a lot of the characters that are from other countries, that have accents, most of them tend to be from other countries that speak English as their first language, or some of the other characters who are from other countries, particularly, we have like Whitey, who's from Japan, and we have Suzuku, who was recently revealed to be from China. They speak English,
right?
And the ones that are from the other English-speaking countries might have they just have that English-speaking accent, whether it's like the Scottish character or the Canadian character or British or whatever. And even beyond that, it's what it comes down to is, even though I can say these characters are of this race and they're from this different country, I don't have nearly the amount of cultural knowledge of what it is that makes that country and that ethnicity and that race, etc., what it is, beyond I have friends and know people personally that may either live in America or just be very familiar with American culture because they have a lot of American friends, etc. But I don't know every single possible thing about every single one of those countries, right? So now okay, I'm just some dude, whatever. But here's the thing: for bigger shows, including ones like South Park or anything that you would see on TV, anything made anywhere really. When they're made by somebody from a particular country, and they've lived in that country all their life, and let's say maybe they only have a certain amount of knowledge of other countries and other cultures, etc. Even if they do their proper research, there's always going to be things. I feel they're always going to be designing whatever it is that they're designing, with the sensibility of whatever country or culture that they hail from.
Right.
South Park is a show created by 2 American guys and a bunch of American writers. So again, any of them, anybody who's worked on South Park that lives in America and was raised in America, who might have connections and knowledge of other cultures and other countries completely, but they're still coming from a place of inherently they are an American, and they're designing a show that is not only made with American sensibilities in comedy and timing and animation. They're writing a show that is first and foremost for an American audience.
Right.
Can you recall? Because actually, here I'll switch it to you as well. Do you have like an example, if you want to talk about it for a little bit, of maybe a show or a game that was produced in Japan? Because obviously your biggest amount of knowledge comes from Japanese culture. Do you know of one that was like maybe designed from the ground up or designed like with thought from the beginning stage, to be specifically for another country, or has a lot of influence from another country beyond just like Cowboy Bebop feels like an American movie because it has American as ism things in it. It's still a Japanese show, like something maybe a little deeper than that, dude. Like, do you have any like ideas offhand?
I'd have to think about that one, because I was actually going to reach for Cowboy Bebop, because it was a good example. Here's the thing, is that it's hard for me to try to put... It's really hard for me to think of a show or a game that Japan put out that they tried really, really hard to make for an audience that wasn't theirs, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, one of the things that I constantly complain about, and I plan on making an episode about it later on, is how Final Fantasy went from being its own original thing to being regurgitated Japanese pop culture ever since 8, debatably 7.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, though. The reason why I have such a hard time is because I'm a true believer that Japan has problems with originality, but that being said, they can take literally anything and everything, change it, and perfect it, and then call it their own. It's something that I've never seen another culture do before, with the exception of how we, as in the West, took anime and manga, changed it a little bit, and made it our own thing. It was the first time I've ever seen something like that happen.
Actually, to cut in with that real quick, I was just doing some research about Mega Man today. I found out that originally the Mega Man Ruby Spears, the American produced cartoon, was going to look a little bit more like the actual box art, like the Japanese box art of Mega Man, and then they decided that because they thought at the time it wasn't really going to go over too well. But a person who was interviewing somebody from Ruby Spears, one of the two producers, they were asking, like, do you think if like a couple years later, when like the anime boom would have hit, when like Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z was more popular in America, would having a little bit more of an anime influenced style have maybe turned out better? And they were like, I don't know, not necessarily, but it's possible, because then what we had later was NT Warrior, and that just was an anime, and that did really well in the U.S. But continue. I just throw that in there.
Really, that's all I really had to say, is that like we in the West see Japan as being this country of strange and bizarre, not in a bad way, but like in an interesting way, culture that we have a hard time grasping and such. But when you really get down to it, I would argue that at least 85% of the entire country lacks originality, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because like I also said before, they know how to take anything, whether it be art, fashion, technology, anything. They know how to make it better. They know how to perfect it, and then they just resell it.
And even just in terms of like entertainment, the creator of Cucumber Quest recently said if you judge the quality of a story by how original it is, then that's your choice, but you're going to have a hard time finding anything good.
Right.
Which I think is a valid point for stuff produced anywhere.
Yeah.
Something I also remember, and everybody, again, I'm going to talk about something Pokemon related. No, I don't have any sort of insider information on this. This is not like word of God or whatever, but I remember, I always have to like put that ahead of time,
right?
Just so people don't take it the wrong way. I remember reading, I think it was an interview with one of the Japanese like animation directors or something that worked on the show, that at one point when Brock was off the show and they had the Orange Islands arc and Tracy was in there for a bit, I remember reading something about they felt that like that change was because Brock was too much of like kind of a too Japanese inspired character. And because Pokemon, by the time they got up to, I think there were at least 100 episodes in the show by that point, right. They thought that a character like Tracy would have been a little bit more appealing to an international audience. And then it turned out that people just were so much more, they wanted Brock back because they just loved the character so much that they brought him back. He stayed and he was on the show for, I want to say, like 12, 13 seasons, all the way up until the end of Diamond and Pearl. And he never really, to me, never struck me. So, I mean, aside from, of course, he had like, the kind of squinty eyes or whatever, but I didn't even really think too far about that because when Pokemon was out, I didn't even really, I think I was just learning that was an anime and that was from Japan. So it didn't even really strike me as that. But, I don't know. but then also I'm realizing now that I'm thinking about it, Silent in Pokemon Black and White was a very much more of a Japanese kind of character because he was like a host club kind of guy. You know, and that didn't seem like it translated entirely well because we kind of, you know, messed around with him a little bit, and he was just kind of a general like, oh, things are amazing, blah blah blah, etc. I love cooking and you know whatnot. But and now on Black and sorry, not Black and White, X and Y. We have all of probably the whitest characters I've ever seen in Pokemon. Because Pokemon X and Y, Ash and the Adventures of Blonde People.
Well, it takes. What you got to understand though is that theoretically this is taking place in France.
Pokemon like equivalent France sort of thing. Yeah.
when you think, I mean, I hate to be stereotypical, but I can't help but feel this is the case. When Japan thinks about the West, maybe not America so much anymore because they've gotten a real dose of what Americans are like. When it comes to other Western countries, though, I think they still hold on to the blue eyes, blonde hair concepts. I mean, one of the things that I applauded Japan very, very heavily was Hitalia before people turned it into something weird. Because even though
Italia was always something weird, let's not kid ourselves.
Well, I'm talking about the fan pairings and things of that nature. But anyway,
I mean, like, sure, but you could argue it's probably like designed with some of that in mind. I don't know, but for a series about a bunch of hot like anthropomorphizing countries into hot guys, I think that the creator probably knew that was an appealing factor. But continue. Anyway.
But I mean, I looked at the design of America and I expected, you know. There were things that happened that I expected from the character, like being obsessed with burgers and being obsessed with being the hero, which it didn't strike me as being racist because it's kind of true in a way. I
think Italia actually, like in terms of its satire, hit most of the right notes.
Right.
For those.
But what surprised me was the appearance. Like, America was brown-headed and like had glasses, and that's not the stereotypical thinking that Japan would have when it comes to Westerners. Like, there was an Air Japan commercial that aired not too terribly long ago that almost immediately got pulled because it was so offensive. Like, I remember a lot of people were like, I don't get why it's so offensive, because it's a conversation between two guys and they're like, how do we make our business more appealing to Westerners? And then it does a cut. It cuts the scene, and then when it comes back, one of the dudes has a blonde wig and a giant fake nose. And a lot of people are like, I don't see how that's offensive. Or if they did, they're like, oh, well, whatever, get over it. And I'm like, you guys have never lived over there and dealt with some of the stupid crap that I've had to deal with when it comes to being a foreigner over there. But that's what made seeing America's design all the better, because it really fit more as to what we are. Like, if we're talking about like a Western Anglo-Saxon white American, a lot of us are brown-haired and a lot of us wear glasses, and I thought it was actually a really neat thing for the people behind the show to do, to design people not so stereotypically. So
yeah,
I don't know.
All right, so I guess we'll start winding things down.
Cool.
I think that there are definitely it's funny, like Hitalia, might even turn out to be one of those exceptions. I think that there are cases where say that there's somebody that is like an American that maybe had a lot of experience in another country. Like someone like you, if you were to do something, okay. What I'm trying to say is Game Exchange, which, by the way, go check that out. Go to GaijinGoombah's channel. Game Exchange is an interesting example of what I'm trying to talk about and just mouth-farted for a year about, is that somebody like you who has had a lot of experience, like personal experience for years in Japan, and you're doing a show that is mostly, obviously you've covered other countries before too,
right,
but it's mostly about Japan,
right,
and cultural differences and changes and things like that. And you have that experience. I think that even past the Japanese episodes, the one that you did recently about Zelda and some of the Muslim stuff, I think is very tasteful, and it is done with the proper research. And now, granted, it is specifically made for an American audience,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just inherently, or not even an American, but just an English-speaking audience in general.
Right.
Maybe you could argue you have American comedic timing, but there's not even very many jokes in your show.
No, there's not.
But no, actually, this works perfectly that I'm talking to you about this, because this is like your show is a good example of this. I think that there are cases like that, and I think that those are movies and games and shows that are worth giving some credit to for that reason. But I think that also to kind of bring this back full circle, in regards to the bit about South Park, what people should remember is that I don't one could say, well, if Germany doesn't or whatever European countries don't want the Nazi zombie related stuff in the game because they find it offensive, like, oh well, then they shouldn't get the game at all. It's like, well, you know what? It's their decision. They're perfectly entitled. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I think that what everybody should remember, like just and this doesn't just apply to the South Park game, but South Park and South Park: The Stick of Truth, by extension, are shows that are primarily and first and foremost built for an American audience, and they're made by Americans.
Yep.
So and if other people from other countries, and they enjoy the show, because the show is greatly successful in other countries, just like Pokemon is successful in practically every country outside of Japan.
Right.
Japanese cultural things and all, whether offensive or not, etc. I think that's what it really comes down to. So, things like that are offensive, it's up to your discretion. But I think that remembering that, like, where people are coming from, depending on just their upbringing and, and how much they know and how much research they're doing and what their experiences are like, I think that it's important to maybe kind of put that into context. Of course, you can't expect everybody to think about that ahead of time, because just people don't know or care sometimes. They're just watching a show or playing a game, so who fucking cares? Right. But I don't know. I think it's worth thinking about. So.
Something to add in, because this whole thing just kind of made me think of this. Like the episode where Mr. Garrison is trying to get fired because he heard there was another teacher that came out and he got fired for being gay, and like won this giant lawsuit. And at the very end, he said that you can tolerate things, but it's okay for things to still piss you off. And like the whole joke was like having this internment camp about like forcing people to love everyone and et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that I'm not saying that this game doesn't belong in other parts of the world. I don't think anyone's going to make that argument.
No,
but
of course.
If you truly believe in freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of letting people think and believe what they want, you have to understand that freedom is a double-edged sword, in that you can't force someone to accept something that they find offensive for whatever reason, whether it be personal, religious, cultural, whatever. You can't force people to like something or to sit through something if it offends them, because they have every right to think and feel the way that they do, even if that means that they don't want something that people are really fighting for in terms of like censorship. Like, yes, I understand that there are countries like China, North Korea, where the people don't have any choice, where they can't even choose whether they can be offended by it or not. But there are democracies in this world, and there are people in this world that are offended by this satirical humor, and their opinions are in equal weight as everyone else's, and that's just something that I want. That was the whole point of my video, and maybe I didn't make that point loud enough, or maybe I focused too much on the fact that I had no idea what people were thinking, that of course this game's going to get censored on international release. But you gotta respect everyone's opinion. You don't have to like it, and there are some things that are going to happen that piss people off, And the fact that these things piss people off is going to piss you off, but that's the price of freedom, and that's the price of international releases.
And also, my closing statement to add on to that is, in terms of just the Stick of Truth video game, as far as I know, the game is still the game. You can still play it, and everything, like the mechanics are still the same. Mm-hmm. So, deal with it! Whatever country you're in. That's going to wrap us up.
All right.
So, thank you for joining me, Gaijin. And to everybody listening out there, what did you think? What do you think of all of this? It's too much for me to even explain, but just leave me your thoughts on this entire thing below. And if you have ideas for Kirblog topics, let me know in the comments as well. You can also tweet me, tumble me, Facebook me, etc. with ideas. Please go right ahead. And you go check out Tome Episode 4, Part 1 on my YouTube channel. Put that up this past week. And hope you enjoy it. And that's gonna wrap us up. So yeah, we'll see you later. Go play Stick of Truth. Bye.